Fabric development environment. Before you can install the Fabric software on your machine, you need to download and install some tools. These tools are curl and Cygwin. Cygwin is needed only for Windows. So if you're using Linux or Mac for this course, you don't have to install Cygwin. The curl tool or utility is a tool to transfer data from or to a server using one of the many supported protocols such as HTTP, FTP, LDAP, etc. The curl tool is available on all the popular operating systems. To set up the curl tool on your machine, just click on the download link available in the lecture resources, hit download, and then click on the curl download wizard. Here, select the curl executable, select the OS and hit select. For the Windows operating system, you will find that there is a generic version and a Cygwin version of the package. I select that you go for the generic version first, and then after you have installed the Cygwin, you also go for the Cygwin version. Once you download the package, just follow the instructions to install it. Next, we're going to install Cygwin on the Windows machine. So if you're using Mac or any flavor of Linux, you can skip the rest of this lecture as you won't need Cygwin. It's only if you are going to use Windows for Hyperledger development, you would need Cygwin. Cygwin is a Unix-like environment command line interface for Microsoft Windows. Typically on Windows, when you want to run some command, you would open up a command window or PowerShell. The commands that you issue on that are DOS-like command or Windows commands. Now let's talk about why do we need Cygwin. The reason we need Cygwin is because Hyperledger Fabric tools and utilities are available as bash scripts. And these scripts cannot be executed on Windows command prompt or PowerShell. So once you have Cygwin installed on your machine, you will be able to execute these scripts on your Windows machine. Keep in mind that some of these scripts may need tweaking. And I've already tweaked some of these tools and have made those available to you in the GitHub repository. We'll talk about that later. So let's go ahead and install Cygwin on Windows. Use the link in the resources for this lecture to get to the Cygwin install page. Here you would find the 64-bit version and the 32-bit version. Depending on your OS, select one of these. I'll download the 64-bit for my Windows machine. Once the download is complete, just launch the setup file and follow the instructions. Install from the internet. Yes, Cygwin. Here you can select the download site. Now it may take a couple of minutes to get the package information. Just click on next and the installation will begin. It'll take a couple of minutes to get the installation completed. Once Cygwin has installed, you will see the Cygwin under your Windows startup. I would suggest that you create a shortcut in the desktop. Just launch Cygwin and you would see a terminal which will allow you to run Linux commands. So here we are running Linux commands on Windows machine. Before you can start using the Cygwin terminal for executing the Fabric scripts, you need to set up the environment. Just so that you are aware, your local file system is mapped to the Cygwin terminal using this convention /cig drive /c, which is the letter that identify the volume, then rest of the folder structure. For the Fabric scripts to execute, you will need to set up two environment variables, compose_convert Windows path and msys no path conversion. Both of these are needed. So what we're going to do is we're going to add these export statements to the bash profile so that your Cygwin terminal, when it is launched, these two environment variables will already be set. Open up the Cygwin terminal and type vi.bash_profile. Once the file is open, just press Shift GA and hit enter and paste the two export statements. At this point, we are good to go. But what you can do is, if you want, you can also change the directory to your workspace. And to do that, you can simply use the cd command, cd cig drive /c /users /my workspace folder. So what this is going to do is it'll always open the Cygwin terminal in my workspace, which is very convenient. Just hit escape and WQ and that'll save the file. Shut down the terminal, open a new instance of the terminal and echo the two environment variables. And for both the environment variables, you should get a value of 1. So at this point, we are good to go. The instructions that I have followed to set up the environment are available in the resources for this lecture. So please go ahead, check out the document and follow the instructions to set up your Cygwin environment on Windows. As a last step, please go ahead and install the curl for the Cygwin. If you're interested in learning more about Cygwin, please please search on Google, and there are tons of good resources where you can learn more about Cygwin. In this lecture, you'll learn how to set up the Fabric development environment on Ubuntu. You may install Fabric development tools on a local Ubuntu machine, or you can install it on a virtual machine provisioned on the cloud. In this lecture, I'll show you the steps needed for installing the Fabric development tools on a virtual machine provisioned on Amazon Web Services. Please note that since my focus is on the installation of the Fabric tools, I'll not spend much time on the cloud setup aspects in this lecture. Please refer to the cloud provider's documentation for VM provisioning and setup related questions. The official version of Ubuntu supported for the Hyperledger development environment is Ubuntu Linux 14.04 or 16.04 LTS, both 64 bits. If you plan to use a desktop or a laptop with Ubuntu, then make sure that you have the right version of Ubuntu on your machine. If you would like to play with the Ubuntu Linux based installation, I would suggest that you provision a virtual machine on a cloud platform such as Amazon DigitalOcean or IBM Bluemix, and then you can install the Hyperledger Fabric on that VM and you can play with it there. In this lecture, I'll show you how to install Hyperledger Fabric development environment on an Amazon VM. And those same instructions can be applied to any cloud platform. If you're installing the Hyperledger Fabric on your local machine, then you can skip the steps that I'm describing for the creation of the virtual machine and go straight to the installation of the prereqs on Ubuntu. On AWS, I have selected the machine image for Ubuntu Server 16.04 LTS, and the virtual machine is a general purpose T2 medium sized virtual machine with 2 vCPUs and 4 GB of memory. Please note that you may incur charges for the use of virtual machine on the cloud. Most of the cloud platforms provide some kind of a Cost Explorer tool. So my suggestion would be to use the Cost Explorer tool to estimate the charges that you may incur with the use of their platform. One quick tip, keep the virtual machine down when you're not using it. Bring it up only when you are ready to experiment with it or play with it. I'm on my EC2 dashboard for Amazon. Click on Launch Instance. I'm going to pick up the Ubuntu Server 16.04. Select the T2 medium. Configure the instance details. I won't change this. Add storage, pick up the default. And then I'm going to just add a tag here. I'll name this machine as HL Fabric Development. As a next step, we will configure the security group. In the security group for the Amazon machines, you would find that only the SSH incoming traffic is allowed. So we need to open up the traffic for TCP, and obviously it's not a good practice to open up the TCP traffic for all ports on any cloud virtual machine. But since I'm just experimenting at this time, showing you how to quickly set up a VM for Hyperledger Fabric, I will ignore those best practices. My suggestion to you would be that you check your cloud provider's documentation to understand how you should proceed forward with the setup of the security groups for your virtual machine. You would need to open up the ports which are used by the orderer, the peer, and the CA, and you will be accessing those ports from outside the virtual machine environment. So once you have done the rule setup for all traffic, let's go ahead and review, and things look good. Let's click on launch. I'll select the key pair. I already have that. I acknowledge and launch the instance. It'll take a couple of minutes for the virtual machine to be ready. Our instance is up and running. If you would like to use any other cloud platform, then you have to check their documentation on how to perform the steps that I have shown you for AWS. To install the software, we have to SSH into the virtual machine. You have to check the documentation for your cloud provider to see what's their suggested way of doing that. On Amazon, go to the EC2 dashboard, select the virtual machine, hit connect, and you will get all the instructions you need for connecting to the virtual machine. I'm on Windows 10, so I'm going to use PuTTY. Please check the instructions on how you can install PuTTY if you're using Windows 10. And at this point, I have logged successfully into the virtual machine. The installation instructions suggest that you do not install Hyperledger Fabric using the root identity. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new user on the VM. And to do that, we will use the command add user. And then once you create the user, then we'll add that user to the sudo list. This username can be any name of your choice. I'll use my own name. Once you have created the user and added to sudo, we have to validate if the username that we have created is working or not. So these are the two steps we will use for validating. To add user, you use the command sudo add user. I'll name the new user as Raj and it requires a password. At this point, I have created a new user. Let's make sure this new user is added to the sudo list. And to do that, simply sudo add user Raj and just add sudo at the end. To validate if the user is created, just do su and provide the username, which in my case is Raj, provide the password, and you should be logged in as the new user. Next, I'm going to check if the home directory is set up. So I'm doing cd tilde and pwd, which shows us that the home directory for the user is created. Next, we're going to get the link for downloading the prerequisites for Ubuntu. For that, we will go to Hyperledger github.io/composer, click on docs, click on installing a development environment, scroll down, and you will see that there is a script for downloading the prerequisites. So just copy this, paste it in the terminal window for your SSH session. The curl command has downloaded a script. Just hit enter ls and you will find that there is a script prereq-ubuntu.sh. Just run this script. What this is going to do is it is going to install the various prerequisites for your Ubuntu virtual machine. This may take a couple of minutes. So here are the list of components that this script has installed. Next, we're going to install the Composer CLI tool using the command npm install -g composer-cli. Composer CLI is needed because the shell scripts in the Fabric development environment has a dependency on it. npm install -g composer-cli. It will take a couple of minutes, and once this script is installed, we'll go ahead and install the Fabric development environment. Go to the site hyperledger.github.io/composer, click on docs, click on installing, select installing a development environment, scroll down. Under step 4, you will find the script that you need to copy and paste in the Ubuntu terminal. Once you hit enter, the zip file will be downloaded and unzipped in the Fabric tools directory under the home folder. At this point, we have all the tools needed for starting the containerized environment. And when you are executing the environment for the first time, you have to download all the Docker images. So that is done by invoking download fabric.sh. And once the Docker images have been downloaded, you start the Fabric environment by invoking startfabric.sh. As a next step, we are going to download the Docker images. And to do that, simply execute the script download fabric.sh. This is going to take a couple of minutes. The Docker images have downloaded. Let's check the images, Docker images. And as you can see, we have downloaded 5 Docker images with the execution of the shells. Next, we are going to execute the startfabric.sh. This is going to start the containers and bring up the Fabric environment. At this point, the containers are up. There is no error. Docker ps. And as you can see, we have 4 containers that are up. One is for peer, another for CA, orderer, and CouchDB. In the next step, we will create the peer admin card using the shell script create peeradmincard.sh. Once the card is created, we will be able to use it for connecting to the Fabric development environment. I'll be covering the cards in a later lecture. Let's go ahead and run the create peeradmincard.sh script, and it has created the peer admin card. In this lecture, I'll walk you through the steps required for setting up Fabric development environment. Make sure that you have installed the right version of Docker or Docker toolkit before trying out the steps explained in this lecture. Installation of Fabric tools on macOS is pretty straightforward. You just have to copy a script and paste it in a terminal window. This script creates a folder fabric-tools under the home directory, and then it downloads the zip file, an archive file, using the curl command. So you need to have curl installed on Mac. And then it unzips the archive file. Now, if you want to install Fabric tools in your own workspace, in your specific Fabric tools directory, then you can skip the first command and just start with the curl command. Once you download the zip file in the folder of your choice, you can call unzip on it. To get the command, go to the website hyperledger.github.io/composer, click on docs, click on installing, then select installing the development environment, scroll down, and in the step 4, you will find the script. Just copy this script from here. Open a terminal window, paste it, and just hit enter. And our Fabric tools directory is created and the tool is installed. After the file extraction, open a terminal window and go to Fabric tools directory, and then simply execute the shell script download fabric.sh. This will download all the Docker images needed for the Hyperledger Fabric runtime. Switch to Fabric tools directory and type download fabric.sh, hit enter. This script, as I mentioned earlier, is going to download all the Docker images. And it may take up to a couple of minutes to download all the Docker images. At this point, our images have been downloaded, and under the images, you will find there are 5 images for Hyperledger Fabric, and under container, you won't see anything as we haven't launched the containers yet. As a next step, we are going to launch the Hyperledger Fabric environment. For that, we will use the start fabric.sh shell script, and then we will create the peer admin card. You will learn about the cards in a later lecture. Go to the Fabric tools directory and simply run start fabric.sh, and it'll launch the containers for the Hyperledger Fabric runtime. Click on the containers and you will find the containers for the Hyperledger Fabric. You'll see the order, peer, CA, and at the end, if the launch is successful, you should not see any errors in the terminal window. Next, let's invoke the create peer admin card.sh, and this will create the peer admin card. So the command has executed successfully and a card is created. In this lecture, I'll walk you through the steps that you need to follow in order to set up the Fabric development environment on Windows. Please note that before you follow the steps that I describe in this lecture, you should have installed Cygwin and Docker. There are 4 steps that you need to follow to set up the Fabric development environment on Windows. The step 1 is to clone the Fabric tools repository. Second step is to download the Docker images using the shell script. Third step is to launch Fabric in a Cygwin terminal. And fourth step is to create a peer admin card. As I'll go through each of these steps, I'll also talk about some known problems and how you need to address them. Before you clone the repository, make sure that your autocrlf is set to false. If it is not, then you will run into trouble with the shell scripts. So if this command prints true, then run this command wherein you are setting the core.autocrlf configuration for git to false. On cloning, if you see errors related to long paths not supported, then the fix is simple. Just run this command and clone again. And this command will enable the git long path support. Next, we will clone the HLF Windows Fabric tool repository. Now, if you're wondering, why did I have to create a new repository when the Fabric tools are available from the Fabric developers? The reason is that when you run the shell scripts the way they are set up in the Cygwin terminal, there are some Windows directory path related issues. So I have tweaked the scripts so that you don't encounter those path related issues. You have to run the command git clone and then provide the URL, copy the URL from the GitHub repository and paste it here. So once the repository is cloned, you will see this folder. So let's go to that folder and we are good to go. Next step is to download the Docker images for Fabric. And that is done by executing a script. But before you execute the download script, make sure that the Docker daemon is up. To download, you would use the script download fabric.sh, which is available under the hlf-windows-fabric-tools folder. I'm on Windows and I'm using Docker Toolbox, so just click on the Docker Quick Start terminal, which will launch the daemon. Now let's execute the download fabric.sh. Now this may take a couple of minutes for the images to download. At this time, the Docker images have downloaded, and you can run the Docker images command to check out all the images, and you would find that there are 5 images downloaded in the local registry. Now we're ready to launch our Fabric development environment, and that we will do by executing the script startfabric.sh. At this point, our Fabric development environment has successfully launched. After you launch the containers, just make sure that there is no error message. One common problem that users have reported with the Windows Docker Toolbox setup is that the container launch fails with memory related message, and sometimes the container launch is successful but the performance of the Fabric containers is sluggish. The issue is related to the VirtualBox VM setup. The memory allocated to the VM is not sufficient, and the fix is very simple. Launch the Oracle VirtualBox Manager. Power off the machine by right-clicking, selecting Close, Power Off. Once the machine is powered off, click on System. You would see that the default memory allocation will be around 1 GB. If you have 8 GB, change this to 4 GB. And if you have less than 8 GB, then my suggestion would be to at least give 2 GB to this machine. Click OK and launch the machine. At this point, we are ready for the next step. Next, we're going to create the peer admin card. And to do that, we'll use the shell script create peer admin card. You'll learn about the cards in a later lecture. And at this point, our peer admin card has been created, which we can use for issuing composer related commands to the Fabric runtime. To shut down the Fabric development environment, simply run the shell script stopfabric.sh. Using the dev tools. By now you have installed quite a few tools on your machine. In this lecture, I'll give you a quick overview of how you would use these tools. The dev setup, that is the Fabric tools, use Docker containers. So as a prerequisite for this code, you need to have basic understanding of Docker container, and you should have tried basic commands of Docker. You don't have to be an expert because we won't be digging deep into the Docker containers. Also, you should have a basic understanding of how Docker Compose works. There are many good resources available on the internet for getting a quick overview of Docker, and also you can try out some of these basic commands using the cheat sheet that's available in the resources for this lecture. I suggest that you install the Visual Code extension for Docker. Once you install this extension in Visual Code, you will be able to execute basic commands against the containers. So you won't have to really type all those Docker commands on the command prompt. Click on the extensions, just type Docker, and you will see this extension available to you. Once you install this, you will be able to use the Docker extension. You can check out the images. You can check out the containers that are running, and you can also run some basic commands. So just right click, you can attach a shell, you can remove a container, restart a container, show the logs, or you can stop the container. So things will become very easy. You won't have to type those Docker commands in the terminal window. Quick note to Windows users, virtual machine on Windows cannot be accessed with the host name localhost. So you have to use the IP address of the virtual machine in which the Docker containers are hosted. If you're using Docker Toolbox in Windows, then when you launch the Quick Start terminal for launching the Docker daemon, you will see the IP address there. Or you can run the docker-machine IP default, and this would give you the same address. So keep in mind, if you are trying to connect to a host port combination which is exposed by a container, then you would need to use this address instead of localhost, and this is applicable only for Windows. On Mac and Ubuntu, you don't have to use the IP address. You can use the localhost name instead of the IP address. Let's talk about the Fabric tools now. Before you can launch the Fabric tools, you need to make sure that your Docker daemon is up. Typically, the installation of Docker will set up a service on your machine so that Docker daemon will be started as part of your machine startup. But if that is not happening, that is, the daemon is not starting up as part of the machine startup, then you will have to launch it manually. For example, if you have installed Docker Toolbox on Windows, you can launch by double-clicking on the Docker Quick Start, and that will launch the terminal as well as the Docker daemon. The Fabric dev environment is started and stopped using shell scripts. On Windows, the scripts will not execute in the command or PowerShell, so Windows user will have to use the Cygwin terminal to execute these scripts. The scripts are available in the Fabric Tools folder. You can use the startfabric.sh script to launch the environment, and to shut down, you can use the stopfabric.sh. As part of the dev environment setup process, we have deployed quite a few composer tools, and we will be using these tools in later sections. By the end of this course, you would have used all of these tools and more. To give you an idea how some of these tools are used, the Composer CLI tool is going to be the most commonly used tool. This tool will allow you to manage your business network applications on the Fabric dev environment. Now, before proceeding any further, please make sure that all the tools that I have discussed are deployed on your machine and are working properly, as you will be using these tools very soon.